much for joining us. We're really excited. Okay, so for those of you who are just seeing SFC for the first time, we're an advocacy group made by students and young professionals. Oh my goodness, I cannot talk today. We are made by students and young professionals for students and young professionals. And we believe that Canada can have a strong future in resources, the economy, and the environment. Please feel free to connect with us at any time on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. All of them are at Students for Canada if you want to learn more about what we do. And we are also hosting a networking event tonight at Barcelona Tavern in Calgary, so please feel free to swing by. Joining us today, we have Michael Rencheck, and he is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Bruce Power. Mike has an extensive career over the last 36 years. Before joining Bruce Power in 2016, he served as the Deputy Chief Operating Officer for Areva Group. And prior to this role, he served as President and CEO of Areva Inc. in North America. Mike didn't start at Areva, however. He was the Senior VP and Chief Nuclear Officer at American Electric Power, or AEP for short. After joining AEP in 1998 as VP of Nuclear Engineering, Mike held various positions during his tenure. Going back farther, Mike worked for other companies such as Florida Power Corporation and public service electric and gas company Salem Nuclear Generating Station. He has other major achievements under his belt, such as recognition by the National Safety Council for his leadership and designation by the U.S. Department of Energy as the STEM ambassador, among many other things. And for a bit of background on Bruce Power, the company provides over 30% of the electricity for Ontario and produces medical grade isotopes that help to sterilize 40% of single-use medical devices around the world, while also treating cancer, which is super cool. Bruce Power provides electricity from 8 nuclear reactors and a 5-turbine wind energy facility. They believe that it is their social responsibility, and they have award-winning economic development and community betterment initiatives. And just before I hand the floor over to Mike here, please know that attendees are encouraged to ask questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A box below. We'll address all of them at the end of the session. And for anyone watching live or watching the recording, our word of the day is isotopes. So DM that to our social media team and you can win some merch. And now I'm going to share the spotlight with our guest. So welcome, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. It's great to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody about nuclear power, but also nuclear power, medical isotopes, and really a clean energy transition. So very excited to get started today. I will talk about my education some, so you get to know me a little bit. I have a Master's of Science in Management, so it's like an MBA, but it has tacked onto it also a computer information degree, so it was a dual degree. I was an electrical engineer when I started out of school almost 40 years ago now, so I hate to say that out loud, but it's been a while. And I am a professional engineer, and I also have a senior reactor operator certification. And I've really done all kinds of energy things. So if you have questions about energy today, happy to talk to you about it. I've done wind farms, offshore wind farms, solar plants, hydro plants, coal plants, gas plants, on and on and on. So happy to have a dialogue with you. I do have a little presentation today to kind of lead us through and also show some pictures, right? So sometimes when you get talking about nuclear energy, there's lots of things that race to your mind, but bottom line is it's a facility like many other facilities. But we specialize in one thing, and that's splitting atoms. So we have to do that very carefully and very cautiously, but that's been done for 50 years here in Ontario. And as Hannah indicated, Bruce Power has been doing it a long time. And right now, Bruce Power is making 15% of all of Ontario's electricity, and or 30% of all of Ontario's electricity. And with our partners at Ontario Power Generation, nuclear makes up 60% of all the electricity here in Ontario. And I'll explain why that's so important for a low carbon future. So I don't know if any of my hosts here have any questions before I get started, but if none, I can launch right in.
Perfect.
All good to go?
That sounds great. I think
right.
that we are all good to go. And yeah, let me know when you want me to switch slides and if you want that video pulled up.
Yeah, sounds good. So let's go on to the next slide. So we'll give you a little bit of background on Bruce Power and how nuclear energy fits here in Canada. So Bruce Power, we supply 30% of the electricity for Ontario using nuclear power. And we have 8 reactors on one site. It's the largest operating nuclear site in the world. And it sits here in Canada, and it's been that way for about 40 years. And it started with Douglas Point on our site. And that led to an expansion of plants here in Ontario at the Pickering Nuclear Station, which is right outside of Toronto, and Darlington Station. And then there's one plant at Point Lepreau. So combined, there's 21 operating CANDU plants in Canada. And there was one in Quebec called Gentilly, which is now retired and is in decommissioning. Also, Douglas Point is on our site. It was originally built in 1968. It was the very first one, and it is also in decommissioning. Now, nuclear power plants are regulated federally here in Canada by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. And what that means is they look over all attributes of design, operation, and including waste management. We actually have 2 to 3 inspectors on our site every day of the year, literally 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So they're pretty much involved in the oversight of the operation. Clearly, as a company, we're responsible for doing everything, but they also make sure they're checking compliance, and they do routine checks of different parameters themselves. So here in Ontario, as part of our provincial policy, you'll see that our Premier and Cabinet have really looked at energy policy from an aspect of CO2 and deep decarbonization. And I'll talk about that some in a few minutes, and that Ontario is deeply decarbonized. And I'll explain how we did that and what steps we go through. We also, on an international level, we're members of the World Association of Nuclear Operators around the world. So worldwide, there's over 400 operating nuclear plants with about 50 under construction. And I just saw today that another one went into service in China. And that expansion is happening literally every year. A few more plants are being added into the generation portfolio. Those plants are under the oversight of the International Atomic Energy Agency. But then there's also an industry organization called the World Association of Nuclear Operators that goes out and inspects each site, and it's a peer inspection. And we work to what we call standards of excellence so that we deliver the highest levels of performance in our facilities. And one thing that is unique about the nuclear industry as compared to many other industries is that we share everything. So if I have a process at my site for engineering or maintenance, and someone wants to know how to do maintenance better, they can just simply pick up the phone and call, and we will welcome them up to come and benchmark our facility to see how they do maintenance and contrast it with what we're doing. And the World Association of Nuclear Operators facilitates those interchanges and training literally throughout the world. We have a similar plant or a sister plant in Romania, and at my level, I talk regularly to their CEO about operations and about other things, as they're looking actually to build 2 new plants in Romania as we speak. And then the last piece, which is probably the best kept secret about our commercial nuclear facilities, we do far more than just generate electricity. We make medical isotopes that save lives every day. In fact, at our plant at Bruce Power, we make cobalt-60, which is used to sterilize about 40% of the once-use medical devices around the world. So if you go to the doctor's or dentist's office, literally anywhere in the world, and they take something out of a plastic bag, an instrument out of a plastic bag, there's a 40% chance that it was sterilized by an isotope made in Tiverton, Ontario, town of 2,000, right? So and we also make cancer treatments. So we power a device that was invented here in Canada called the Gamma Knife, and it's used for brain tumor treatments. That's a non-invasive treatment for brain tumors. Quite frankly, I often say, like, how many people know somebody that had cancer, right? And so my sister-in-law called around Christmas time, and she had a brain tumor, and she said to me, "Do you know anything about the gamma knife?" And I was able to explain to her what it does and how it's used, simply because we make the isotopes for it. And we also just put in production a brand new isotope production system that we actually made the first product yesterday. And it's making lutetium-177. But this isotope production system is a game changer, because it means we'll be able to make medical isotopes now all the time while we're operating. Where the cobalt, it takes about 24 months, and we have to take the unit offline to get the isotope. With this system, we make it all the time. So every 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the isotope, and we can shoot out new packages. So lutetium-177 is being used for prostate cancer treatment, but it's also in a new vein of cancer research called theranostics that's being run by Dr. Rebecca Wong here in Toronto. And she's working in the University Health Network here at Prince Margaret Hospital. And she's come up with a new form of cancer, and I'm going to call it research. Theranostics is effectively where she can do diagnosis and treatment at the same time. And she has such great success with early results. You can see a picture of a person's body full of cancer cells, and then after treatment, they're predominantly gone. And so what this new production system means is that cancer treatments and cancer research now, we can unlock that, because what has hindered cancer research for years is the inability to get access to isotopes. Well, with this new production system, we can make them. Typically, medical isotopes are made in research reactors, which are very, very small, or cyclotrons, which also produce small amounts. And with our plants, like I said, the cobalt-60, we sterilized 40% the once-used medical devices around the world. It's that type of scale that we can bring into the medical community. So not only could we make a cancer treatment, we can make it at a scale where it will be affordable and available to everybody. Next slide, please. So these are some of the entries of nuclear energy into Canada. And I think as we go forward, it really provides a great context for nuclear power and for a clean energy future. I think I'd like to show the video now, and that way you can get a little more context with some pictures and some discussion. Can't hear the volume.
Hannah, you're going to need to share your computer sound.
Uh-oh. Okay, how do I, sorry. Oh my God, how do I change this setting?
So stop sharing it, and then when you go to share it again, press share audio. There you go.
Got it. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Restart.
We don't use Zoom much, so I'm not going to be that helpful to you with this one. We use Teams.
Almost everything in our lives depends upon electricity. It keeps our homes safe and comfortable. It drives our computers. It harvests our food and runs our hospitals. And the need for stable, reliable energy keeps growing as technology continues to transform every sector of our society. Agriculture, healthcare, transportation, construction, entertainment, and telecommunications. We have to keep pace with the demand, and that's where nuclear power comes in. Located on the traditional and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation and the traditional harvesting territory of the historic Saugeen Métis and the Métis Nation of Ontario, Bruce Power delivers about a third of Ontario's electricity from this site. Welcome to North America's largest nuclear generating facility.
Hello, my name is Mike Rencheck. I'm President and CEO of Bruce Power. Nuclear energy is one of the most reliable forms of energy available to mankind. It contributes to 60% of Ontario's electricity, and we can count on it 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, no matter the weather. The electricity we produce creates no carbon emissions. That means we're helping to keep Ontario's air clean and assisting the province and the country in achieving their climate change targets. We are part of the solution now and well into the future. One of the things that's unique about Bruce Power is our status as one of Canada's largest public-private sector partnerships. We are a private, Canadian-owned company, and that includes our employees who have an ownership stake in our business. We operate under a long-term lease agreement with the province. All of our assets remain publicly owned. Bruce Power is fully responsible for operating and investing in our units, and that includes all the costs of our operations and our maintenance, our multi-billion-dollar life extension project, our used fuel management, and the eventual decommissioning of the site. We know that as citizens and businesses in this province, you're counting on us to provide safe, reliable, and carbon-free energy for decades to come. With our ongoing investments in the site, we are extending our operations through 2064. We are guaranteeing good-paying jobs and billions in annual economic investment across the province, as well as clean air and reliable electricity for the people of Ontario. We continue to expand our production of medical isotopes that will support the future of cancer-fighting technologies in Canada and around the world. Nuclear power does more than keep the lights on. We save lives every day. We make Ontario cleaner and the world a healthier place for families to live and for businesses to grow. Thank you for coming today, and welcome to Bruce Power.
So thanks for playing that video. It shows you some pictures, so you get to see the plant and the people. And our people are fantastic. They're absolutely amazing at what they do every day, especially through the pandemic. Came into work every day, produced electricity, and made medical isotope harvests that really helped combat climate change. In fact, our isotope harvest for cobalt in the 2 years, we were able to sterilize something like 50 billion pairs of surgical gloves or swabs. So we were a major healthcare provider all throughout the pandemic to keep materials flowing and keep people healthy and safe. Next slide, please. So what does this mean? Like, what does nuclear power mean in the context of electricity? First, from the aspect of cost. So in Ontario, 60% of the electricity provided is nuclear energy. About 25% of the supply mix is hydro. We have about 8% solar and wind, and that's backed up by natural gas and some biomass. And when you look at Ontario, our average price for electricity is about 13.5 cents. And here's how the different electric sources contribute to that price. So our price is about 7.85 cents per kilowatt hour. With Ontario Power Generation, about 9.6 cents. Gas is about 12.5 cents, and these are last year's numbers. So natural gas prices have tripled during that time frame, so it's much more expensive now. Wind's about 15 cents, and solar is about 49 cents, with biofuel at about 30 cents or 27 cents, and hydro is about 6 cents. So think about that. 60% of the energy is roughly I'll say 9 cents plus 6 cents is about 85% of the energy. So the low cost production is really around nuclear and hydro here in Ontario. It's holding the price of power down. And what we've been able to achieve is in 2012-13 timeframe, we were able to phase out all coal generation here in Ontario. And that was accomplished by Bruce Power supplying 70% of the energy needed for the phase out of those coal plants through the restart of some of our nuclear facilities. What that meant was in peak times, we had like 53 days where the ozone was so bad, if you had asthma, you couldn't come outside in Toronto every summer. Since 2014, it's like zero. Like you may get a fraction of an hour. It's really done a lot to clean the air here in Toronto. But more importantly, next slide, please. When you look at climate change, we've been able through that exercise and through the increase of nuclear, hydro, and renewables, really deeply decarbonize our grid. When you look at electric grids, deep decarbonization is believed to be below 50 grams equivalent of CO2 per kilowatt hour. Well, here in Ontario, we're at 35 grams equivalent. So our electric sector in Ontario is deeply decarbonized. We are a world leader in clean energy production here. You hear a lot about Germany and California, and in Germany's case, as an example, they're somewhere around 350 to 400 grams equivalent of CO2 per kilowatt hour. So they have trillions of dollars to still remaining to invest to be able to clean up their electric sector. Even though you hear about them being a world leader, it's quite the contrary. And their average price of electricity in Canadian dollars is about 47 cents a kilowatt hour. And in fact, this morning I saw, because of the issues with Russia invading the Ukraine, their citizens are paying something like $245 per kilowatt hour on average for electricity. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy numbers. California is also viewed as a leader in clean energy space. Their price is about 30 cents, and they're somewhere around 150 grams equivalent of CO2 per kilowatt hour. And they had been moving to shut down their remaining nuclear plant, which is Diablo Canyon, which provides about 15% of the clean energy in California. So that energy would likely be replaced in the short term by fossil fuels. So their emissions are only going to go up. And at the same time, they're going to have to continue investing in other forms of energy to get deeply decarbonized. There are other grids around the world that are deeply decarbonized. You'll find those in Sweden and Finland and France. And many of those places use a combination of nuclear, hydro, and renewables. And you'll see a very similar footprint to what we have. So there is a blueprint for doing this. And there are many cases that show this can be done and done effectively using nuclear power and other clean energy sources. Next slide, please. Now, in our area in Bruce Grey and Huron County, we're in a very rural area of Ontario. We're on Lake Huron, about 2.5 to 3 hours kind of northwest of Toronto. And what we're doing is extending the life of our plants. And while we're doing that, we're able to also continue to reduce our emissions footprint. So our life extension program will take our units all the way out to an operational life of 2064 and beyond, somewhere likely 2070, 2075 in that range. You had to terminate the lease at 50 years. All you business majors know this, right? You had to terminate at 50 years because if we go over 50 years, we get taxed on the lease. So to avoid that taxation, we're 1 day short of a 50-year lease. We've also had, because of that, we've been able to put in place a commitment to be net zero by 2027. We want to be the first nuclear operator in North America to be net zero, and probably the first among, if not the first, among the first to be net zero as a utility. One of the ways we're doing that is we have announced a Project 2030, where we'll be able to continually increasing the output of our plant. In 2016, we were 6,300 megawatts, and through our life extension program last year, we announced increases to 6,550 megawatts. And then by 2030, we'll be well over 7,000 megawatts. We're hoping someday to get to 7,300, maybe 7,700 megawatts electric in that range. So all that new energy would provide enough power for over 700,000 new homes. And the footprint of our site is relatively small. And what I mean by that is we have 3,000 acres. You might say, well, that's really large, but actually where the buildings are, it's really only a fraction of that. The rest of the property is home to about 250 different types of species. And quite frankly, we've got beaver ponds, streams that trout run through, and it really is a habitat for many of the animals that are native to our area. Also, one of the important things that we were able to do last year from a financing perspective is we were able to issue a green bond. So what I mean by that is our environmental programs, sustainability and governance programs were reviewed by Cicero and independently rated as medium green, and the Sustainalytics gave us a strong rating of green. And quite frankly, we had a very high, the highest level possible for governance, which would make sense because we're running nuclear power plants, right? We control pretty much everything that goes on. And as a result, we were able to go out to the financial communities and put a bond out for $500 million. We had over 60 banks, investment houses wanting bonding, and they asked for $3 billion worth of bonds, but we only needed 500 million, so we took that and moved on. Next slide, please. A big part of our story then with our assets, it's not just to make electricity, that we talked about the medical isotopes, so I won't go through that again, but what it means here for Ontario and for Canada, if we can make isotopes at this scale, we can become a center of excellence for isotope production, pharmaceuticals related to isotopes, and then medical research. And you see these types of things forming here in the province. I talked about Dr. Rebecca Wong's cancer research evolving. We also have biopharma facilities getting set up in the area here, pursuing lutetium-177 and other drugs. So we are at the very beginning of really becoming even a larger superpower in isotope production. And so we already dominate the world in cobalt-60 production. And now with our new isotope production system, we'll be able to move into other isotopes. That means vertically integrating through both the front end processes. We have many minerals here in Canada that we can mine. So the mining, preparation of the isotope, production of the isotope, and then the dissolution into medicines are all possible. Our life extension program is running here right now. It's the largest private sector investment program here in Canada. We're creating about 22,000 direct and indirect jobs as a result of that program. It contributes about $3 to $4 billion of GDP into the economy that's incremental, in addition to the $3 billion that we normally just through the operation of our assets. So we're a major economic driver here in Canada. And one thing you should know, like our facilities, nuclear is a made in Canada solution. 90% of the money we spend stays in Ontario, and 95 to 98% of it stays in Canada. We have a viable manufacturing base here in Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Quebec, for that matter, that is capable of building new plants. It's one of a very few supply chains in the world that remain fully integrated with that capability. And so when you think about countries, you would think about China, Russia, Korea, Japan, Canada as having a supply base that can build nuclear. And it also ties directly in with our mining industry. We have one of the largest uranium mining companies in the world here called Cameco, headquartered in Saskatchewan. Next slide, please. So as we look at continuing on with a clean energy mix, we think that a clean energy mix using a strong base load of nuclear and hydro paired with intermittent sources like solar and wind and other diverse portfolio means like pumped hydro, like carbon capture sequestration, we can really have a clean energy grid that extends through all of Canada at an affordable price. In our area, we are continuing to look at nuclear power. We're looking at large-scale nuclear plants. We're looking at large-scale storage. Pumped hydro is an example of that. So batteries typically last 4, maybe 6 hours at most. This is very short term, but if you get a large-scale pumped hydro, you can get those up to 1,000 megawatts to last 10 hours to 12 hours. That's the type of demand storage that we need to power an economy. So you can run it for an entire day, right, and then recharge it at night. Nuclear is set up well for that. We're also looking at small modular reactors. You see those, if you read the papers, there's a lot of work going on around the world in the development of new designs and now some of the demonstrations. And our partners here in Ontario Power Generation, they've announced that they're building the first small modular reactor in Canada at their Darlington site. And it'll be a GE BWRX 300. So that'll be the groundbreaking move that they make, and we're working hand in hand with them. Also, micro reactors. They're smaller reactors. Some produce high temperatures, high temperature steam. It can be used for power generation or heating. We've signed a memorandum of understanding with Westinghouse on their eVinci microreactor, and that's pursuing 2 paths, one here in Canada, the other in the U.S., and they're working to build a demonstration plant at Idaho National Lab in the U.S., and then we'll continue working with them here in Canada. We're also looking at advanced nuclear designs that would use 4th generation technology that would be gas or other large reactor technologies. And then we think there's advanced nuclear technologies in the way of fusion. There's a firm in Vancouver called General Fusion that they've figured out how to make a fusion reaction using compression of plasma. And they've been able to adopt the design that was done at Oak Ridge National Lab. Basically, it looks like it came from some type of weapons research in the 60s that created the plasma pulse. Well, the reason why they couldn't go further with it, because in 1960, it requires an exact geometry, circular geometry, to be machined so that when the compression happens, it's uniform. Well, quite frankly, in that period of time, you just simply couldn't make those components precise enough. Well, with 3D printing and adaptive manufacturing now, General Fusion's been able to do this over and over again. So they're actually going to build a demonstration plant now in the United Kingdom, and we are participating with them in that. So we'll see how that goes, and as it continues to advance, we'll look at partnering with them to potentially advance fusion here in Ontario. And it's quite exciting to see this going. And then we're also looking at other complementary technologies, such as being able to make hydrogen from nuclear. As an example, we have a steam source at site. With that steam energy, we can cheaply make hydrogen. And once you get to the hydrogen molecule, you can do lots of things with it. So you can use hydrogen as a fuel for cement plants, steel plants, airplanes. You can convert that hydrogen into other synthetic fuels, things like methanol, where you're combining it with CO2, so you can capture CO2 and then produce another product with it. But we think this will enable that transition for transportation fuels effectively beyond EVs. So heavy vehicles, heavy freight, trains, planes, they're going to need something beyond batteries. And we think hydrogen or other synthetic fuels will fit into this category nicely. Next slide, please. So when I look at where we're going towards a net zero economy, I think it provides a lot of opportunities in industry, not only for clean energy transition and ability to get clean air, but the opportunity for a diverse portfolio of generation assets to really help through this transition. And we're quite blessed here in Canada. So with the right policy support put in place at the federal government and in provinces, we can use the resources that are natural to each of our areas, and that includes being able to be, I'll say, inclusive for all communities to advance. In our area, we have an economic development program underway in rural Ontario. So our largest town nearby a few years back was like 14,000 people, right? So relatively small. But our 3 counties now, as a result of our program, we've had 60 suppliers move into the area now. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of building permit going on. We have new homes being built somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 to, I'm going to use the upper bound of 10,000 because they keep getting different numbers reported back. It's hundreds of millions of dollars of tax base that's being added. It's enabling new infrastructure like new schools, expanded hospitals. We have over 250,000 square feet of abandoned factories and storefronts now in use and productive. And you can do these types of things when you have long-lived assets like a nuclear power plant. When you look at the parking lot, like every day coming into work at our site throughout the pandemic, or I should say every week, we had upwards of 10 to 12,000 unique people coming to work at our facility each week. And we had thousands working remotely from home. So it's a major economic and employment driver. And this same model can be replicated in other areas. And it can be combined with, like I said, the resources that are indigenous to the areas. We have also in our isotopes program our indigenous communities. The Saugeen Ojibwa Nation is an investor. So as we make isotopes, they get a return on their investment for their communities. So all communities can be involved. We can be inclusive of everybody, and at the end of the day, we can all share in the benefits of having clean energy and emission-free power, medical isotopes, and a bright future. So with that, I'll stop talking and see if there's any questions.